You know, it does seem a bit strange, if not odd at first, to think that ITV thought it was a good enough idea to cast this guy as Jules Maigret, doesn't it?
Here's to give you some tamoxibubbin. 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 To give you a drug.
Bonjour YouTube, Film Buff 06 here, coming your way with my review for the recent TV movie adaptation of the Jules Maigret story, Maigret Sets a Trap, which was initially broadcast on ITV1 on Monday the 28th of March 2016 as part of the Easter schedules. It is the first episode of a new two-part reboot with Maigret's Dead Man due to be broadcast later this year of Georges Simenon's iconic pipe-smoking French detective that was created way back in 1931. It was adapted for the small screen from Simenon's 1955 detective novel of the same name by executive producer Stewart Harcourt. It was directed by Ashley Pearce, who previously directed episodes of Casualty, Silent Witness, Poirot, Garrow's Law, Accused, and Downton Abbey. It features Mr. Bean, Edmund Blackadder, and Johnny English himself, Rowan Atkinson, as only the third British actor to take on the role of Detective Chief Inspector Jules Maigret for the small screen, after Sir Michael Gambon in the early 90s and Rupert Davies in the 60s. And it also stars Lucy Cohu of Torchwood Children of Earth and Broadchurch fame as Madame Maigret, Aidan McArdle, Leo Starr of Call the Midwife and Lewis fame, Shaun Dingwall, aka Pete Tyler from Doctor Who, Jack McMullen, who of course is best known for portraying Finn Sharkey in Waterloo Road, Mark Heap, Rufus Wright, who if you don't know him was in Quantum of Solace alongside Daniel Craig, TV and stage actor David Dawson and Fiona Shaw, aka Aunt Petunia Dursley from the Harry Potter films. Now, if, like me, you're not too familiar with the character of Jules Maigret, or even read the books, the story of Maigret Sets a Trap takes place during a sweltering Parisian summer in 1955, where the city is being gripped by fear because a serial killer has already murdered 5 young women with dark hair in the streets of Montmartre after dark, in a similar style to the Whitechapel murders of Jack the Ripper. And with his public and professional reputation under intense scrutiny, the pressure is on for Detective Chief Inspector Jules Maigret himself to come up with a cunning plan of his own by setting up a trap in order to catch the killer before he strikes again. Now, coming from someone who isn't too ridiculously familiar with the character of Jules Maigret, or even read the books, I was initially a bit trepidatious going into this one, judging from the mixed to negative critical reception that it got from national newspapers as well as on Twitter. Not only that, but also when I first found out that this was written by the same guy who gave us not just Jericho with Robert Lindsay, but also apparently some of the weakest Miss Marple and Poirot adaptations, i.e. By the Pricking of My Thumbs and Murder on the Orient Express, among others. The 2009 adaptation of Treasure Island, which featured Eddie Izzard as Long John Silver, which I haven't seen, by the way, and especially the god-awful 2006 BBC adaptation of Dracula, which, by the way, absolutely sucked, and which I could perfectly describe as just a horribly written piece of fan fiction that Stewart Harcourt lazily copied and pasted from the internet and just slapped the title Dracula in there. Anyways, I thought to myself, oh shit, this is not good news to me at all. However, the trailer to this looked very promising, so I thought, you know what, I am a bit nervous about what I'm going to think of this adaptation, but I'm at least going to go into it with an open mind and make my own opinion. So, what are my thoughts on Maigret Sets a Trap? While it isn't perfect, and it does have its fair share of flaws, for what it was, I thought this was a surprisingly good adaptation of the source material. Ashley Pearce's direction was just fantastic. The way Stewart Harcourt adapted this story, and I never thought I would say this, it was actually surprisingly good. He didn't throw any unnecessary plot elements into the story, nor did he come up with some bullshit fanfiction plot that didn't make an awful lick of sense. he actually stayed true to the original source material and the spirit of the Jules Maigret character this time around. Stewart Harcourt, I may have hated you in the past for what you did to Dracula over at the BBC, but with this, you've pretty much redeemed yourself in my eyes. Well done, my friend. The costumes, the props, the set design, the production design, and the locations in Budapest, except for Montmartre, that were used for 1950s post-war Paris all looked incredibly authentic and really made me feel like I took a TARDIS or even took the DeLorean from the Back to the Future films and literally travelled back in time to that particular time period in Paris. The cinematography was superb. The music, I thought, was very good, and it suited the atmosphere and the bleak, almost operatic tone of the film very well. And it was also very reminiscent to the score for the Godfather films, especially with the trumpet sounds at times. The acting was superb across the board. The supporting cast all did a great job with their performances. Shaun Dingwall was great as essentially one of Maigret's sidekicks. Although her character didn't have an awful lot to do in the movie, Lucy Cohu also did a great job with the minimum amount of screen time that she had as Madame Maigret. David Dawson was fantastically creepy as the killer Marcel Monsan. Yes, his character may seem on paper to be an unassuming wet blanket, but there were times in his performance where he pretty much reminded me of Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates in Psycho. Fiona Shaw as Madame Monsan, the domineering mother, she was just absolutely brilliant. She killed every scene she was in, and there were times where she was actually scary, almost a genetic splice between Aunt Petunia and Norma Desmond. Wow. But of course, the standout performance in this movie is from Rowan Atkinson as Maigret. I'm speechless, just literally lost for words. I would never have thought that he'd be able to pull off such a stray and dramatic role like this so well, and also take this role as seriously as he did without even cracking a smile or pulling an odd, funny face, as I initially thought he was going to do within the first few minutes of the film. What I also love about Maigret as a character in this film is that he isn't a Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot or Inspector Morse or Sherlock Holmes type figure. He was just an ordinary guy doing his job. And yes, he may seem to be a bit emotionless and boring on the surface, but deep down, he is actually human. Also, he's kind of almost like a psychologist in the sense that he understands other people, what makes them tick, how they think, and what drives them over the edge to become potential killers. The only thing in this film that I wasn't really too keen on was the use of English subtitles for the French newspaper headlines throughout the film. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why they did this, because some English people would not be able to understand the French language all that well, if that makes any sense. But I personally felt that it was just a bit unnecessary, and it reminded me a bit too much of the visual techniques that the BBC used for the text messages in Sherlock, and especially in the very first episode of that series, A Study in Pink. And yes, I know a lot of people could criticise the cast for portraying essentially French characters, albeit with British accents. But honestly, the way I see it, I would rather have that than have the cast put on these fake French accents that sound too ridiculously naff and annoying, like Steve Martin as Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther films. Now, if you are a fan of Rowan Atkinson, a fan of the character of Jules Maigret, a fan of detective dramas, a fan of crime dramas, a fan of psychological thrillers, or just a fan of detective stories in general, I would very much recommend that you check this film out. In conclusion, Maigret Sets a Trap wasn't perfect, but it was surprisingly better than I initially thought it was going to be. There was hardly a moment where I was constantly bored or felt the urge to look at my watch or fall asleep. I was hooked on the mystery, I was intrigued the whole way through. Rowan Atkinson completely nailed the character of Maigret and made him his own. Stewart Harcourt did the character and the spirit of the book justice this time around. I cannot wait to see what ITV does with Maigret's Dead Man later this year, and my overall rating for Maigret Sets a Trap is a solid 8 out of 10. Now, feel free to leave a comment in the section below and let me know your thoughts on Maigret Sets a Trap. Let me know if you guys are looking forward to Maigret's Dead Man later this year as much as I am. And also let me know what your favourite Rowan Atkinson performance is. Plus, feel free to subscribe to my channel as always. And until my next video, which is going to be a review of the Angry Birds movie, do take care, everyone, and au revoir.